Do you ever feel like you are sleepwalking through life? What happens when we come to the realization that the life we were sold is a mere fantasy and that what we are left with is a reality that we have to cope with and make the best of? In today's episode of the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, we wrestle with a bleak exploration of masculinity in the modern age. We are going to break the first rule of Fight Club by talking about this film that came out 25 years ago and has become since one of the most discussed and analyzed films in pop culture, inviting a range of interpretations. But as we will argue in this episode, this is ultimately a story about the struggle to find meaning and the wayward journey of defining masculinity in the 21st century. How do we cope when the world around us seems to be falling apart? When we often resort to numbing ourselves from feelings of meaninglessness through consumption and self-help, trying to bandage flesh wounds that require an open heart surgery of transformation. Fight Club is a cautionary tale of what happens when we hand the scalpel to someone other than God to achieve that transformation. Along with its author, we'll also wrestle with the philosophies of Nietzsche, the psychology of Carl Jung, and the theology of Girard. And if you're ready to diagnose the problems of modern masculinity, then let's travel down the wayward road to destruction that is Fight Club. Welcome to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, where we analyze stories and films that help us make sense of life. We are four friends with backgrounds in storytelling, filmmaking, teaching, and narrative therapy. Join us on our quest towards telling and living our stories more meaningfully. I'm Derek Hatch.
My name is Nick Natal.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joseph Wilson.
I'm Jason Lin.
All right, guys, let's throw hands and talk about this movie.
We're actually going to fight? Let's go.
Oh, I'm always down.
This is Fight Club right here, right now. It's happening.
I need the first hit so I can get into the mood of it.
So just a disclaimer here that this is one of the most spoiler-filled movies with, I think, one of the most iconic twists in cinema in, at least recent decades. So if you have not seen Fight Club, you should stop this, go see it, and then push the continue button right now because Joseph's about to spoil
the whole twist right in the beginning.
In the beginning. This is what I do.
Go ahead, Joe.
That's what the movie did.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, good writing.
So, okay.
Good podcast.
I got good writing. Because again, he's not outsourcing it to somebody else. It's still a inner source that he's doing it. He's still trying to fix himself together,
right?
Which connects to that aspect of if you're not allowing God to do it, you think you're fixing yourself, but you're really not.
Yeah,
you're allowing infections to come through and stuff like that. So that's when you were reading your whole synopsis, I was like, oh, I like what you said with that quote. So
yeah, thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because Fight Club was a book a few years before the movie came out, and the author Chuck Palahniuk has this quote that there's a lack of modern stories out there for men about what it means to be a man today.
I was just listening to somebody talk about that today. Yeah, that women have all these different types of things. They have book club, they have knitting things, they have all this source, but men either have what do you say, the Dead Poets Society, or what was the other one?
Or Fight Club.
Or Fight Club. Yeah.
He's like that's the options, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of talks about how that's the journey that we could take as men, and it works out perfect because Nick, you had the intuition to say we should do the holdovers with this, and that's going to be our next episode. Is we're going to kind of see the antidote, the counterpoint to this. But before we get there, we're going to spend some time diagnosing this wayward journey of masculinity that's depicted here. So I'm going to read the letterbox real quick, and then we're going to hop into it. Mischief, mayhem, soap. A ticking time bomb insomniac and a slippery soap salesman channel primal male aggression into a shocking new form of therapy. Their concept catches on with underground fight clubs forming in every town until an eccentric gets in the way and ignites an out-of-control spiral toward oblivion.
Sounds like Batman Returns.
What was I thinking?
I feel like this is a perfect character for Batman Returns.
Oh,
Fist
man.
the club.
Bring the soap.
Right?
Yo, I will say that at the soap making scene, when they got to the dumpster and they're talking and they brought out the bag, I paused it and left my room for a break. I was like, Jeez.
It's gonna be too much.
Because it rips on the barbed wire.
Oh, no, it was during that. I got up and I was like, nah, I need a break. And it was still going and they had ripped it. I'm like, yep, I do need a break.
That's funny.
That's right. And I'm just like,
it did take me a couple days to finish this movie. I think it took me two. Yeah, because it was just like I was watching it with Nancy and she was like, I can't do this. I was like, okay, I'll watch this.
Funny.
I'll
it
watch
is a
this when you're
miracle
around.
I got Tori to finish it. The only thing that kept Tori
crazy.
going was the promise that the twist was going to be good.
what did
Yeah.
you think of it?
Right before it came, she's like, "Oh, I think I figured it out now." And I think at that point she was like, "Okay." And then we get done with it and she's like, "Yeah, I didn't like that."
I wonder what I would have thought as an older person watching it for the first time.
Yeah.
Because it's more repulsive now than it was much easier to watch when I was a teenager.
Interesting.
But it's much more repulsive now. And I wonder if I would have caught the twist because I told you the second time you watch it, it is so obvious.
It's
like how could you miss it?
Right.
Well, I was seeing I can't remember. They're not cut-ins. I forgot what he said. The overlays or whatever. Like
Voiceovers.
No, it's when
he inserts himself in the image.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I saw like a little bit of like a man in the beginning. We're gonna
In
see
the
this later.
hospital.
Yeah, and that's Tyler Durden, right?
Well, even so you got the opening monologue he gives about knowing Tyler Durden. Then you see in that like opening sequence, which this is actually, I think, one of my favorite parts of the film, is this whole exploration of the narrator trying to figure out how they're going to deal with this problem that they have. So he has a hard time being able to rest, to sleep.
Which, man, that would be horrible, dude, because I love me.
My dad.
It's Joe's
my dad
worst
has-
nightmare.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, he doesn't sleep.
Oh,
Wow.
gosh.
Nearly 3 hours.
I'm praying for your dad every single night now. Like, before I
Please,
get-
please,
'cause
please,
that's
it's awful.
wild. Yeah.
So he goes to that doctor, and the doctor says, you want to see real, like people with genuine problems, like real suffering, right? And then so he goes to the testicular cancer support groups there. And when he goes there, he sees something. He sees that there's a physical emasculation that's happening in that group, right? As they've lost their balls, literally.
Yeah.
But he's also seeing that there's this space that they have where they can be vulnerable, where they can cry. And even though has nowhere near the same level of suffering that they're going through, he wants to be a part of something bigger than himself. Because I feel like in the beginning, there's a numbness that he's experiencing to life. And it's when he goes to these support groups that he feels something again
Well,
by being around pain.
His life is metaphorically, he's lost his balls.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Now
Yes.
he's going to a support group that's like the actual,
Yeah.
they have actually lost their balls. So it's kind of like this collide of those ideas.
And they're
Yes.
like grieving together.
Mhm.
And then he actually finds peace and he can sleep after that.
Yes.
And he gets hooked on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because you see that, like what you mentioned a moment ago, the little blurb of Tyler Durden in the background. It's like Tyler Durden is coming into focus. Like he's beginning to create this persona in his sleep. When he's getting something, Tyler Durden is also being created, which is fascinating because they're rising together in that opening
I
sequence.
thought he shows up before the groups.
I think
The groups are right away in the beginning.
Well, then he cuts back to it,
I
and
think-
then they get to the groups.
Because
he
he
shows
comes
up on the plane.
He comes after, what's the girl's name again? After their encounter, they make the deal.
It's right before the doctor says go to the support group that his image pops up.
Really?
Yeah.
So it happens at the exact same time.
that's perfect then.
As
Yeah.
soon as he says go to this group, Tyler pops up.
Yeah. So
Where?
it's
Where did
It's like a flash. You know how he's the film projector inserting those quick images?
Yes.
Pops up himself in the beginning.
yes.
Oh, that's dope.
There's
Yeah.
one of those at the end, but don't try to find it.
We'll talk about the one at the end later because it's actually really brilliant.
That's pretty wild.
Because this is a movie about balls. Like it really, really, like the second time I watched it, I'm like, this is all this movie
Yeah,
is about.
it's
It's,
either-
like Watership Down in the Doze. Like this is just about losing your balls.
You keeping your balls or you're being neutered.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, in the moment where the man Bob, right, is hugging him
Yeah.
as he's saying, "I'm still a man."
With
I'm
his
like,
man boobs.
yes. I'm like, this is like, that's what this movie is wrestling with. Because he's stuck in this corporate job, mundane thing. Like, I love what you said there, Nick, about like, he is emasculated, you know?
Yeah.
And there's even this, which if you're talking about Batman Returns earlier, there's this amazing like vision with a penguin, which took me a while.
Hey, let's go. Let's go. I've watched Batman Returns like 4 times in the last 4 days. and it's getting better every time I watch it. This is God right now with the banquet. I cannot wait for the podcast to do Batman Returns.
Well, okay,
Just wait, guys.
so here's a preview of Batman Returns. You ready for this? So it took me a while to figure out this scene, and then it hit me. So here's me. I'm taking a stab at it, okay? So penguins can't fly. They can't go anywhere. They're confined to, like, their environment. And maybe, Jason, you can help me out with this with bird speak here,
Yeah,
right?
I got you.
There's this idea that he feels trapped, that he's in this kind of cave, and he can't really
take off.
in life.
He's just stuck to the water and whatever that holds in the land. And even on land, he can't get around even like any other bird would.
Right.
They're just limited because, you know, they can only hobble around and flap, and that's kind of the penguin compared to all other humans.
You know what I think it's interesting about the penguin too, because a penguin takes the role of what a mother would take in a wild. They take care of the babies. They don't go out to hunt.
That's good.
But the ladies go out to hunt. So it's even a more like demasculating thing because he's not a real, well, I won't say penguins aren't real men,
that's right.
but you know.
Well, and when you're confined to your environment, right, like that, what do? You just try to make your environment the best of what it is. And he does that literally with his apartment, with the IKEA furniture. So it's like the IKEA furniture, he's defined by that. He's like, what's the quote where he's like, what countertop, like which piece of furniture defines me
as a person.
Yes, right?
I would get the little yin and yang coffee table.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's interesting because he feels trapped in that space and he's just trying to, as far as he knows, make a nest. Exactly. So it's not until he goes to this group that he says, there's this quote where he says, every evening I died, every evening I was born again, resurrected. So there's something religious, right? That he's kind of breaking him out of this funk. And he'll later describe Fight Club as Pentecostal, as being like church. There's something that is getting in the way of him experiencing this, and that's when Marla shows up. And so there's a couple theories I have about Marla and why he's so...
Me too.
Yeah, so what are your guys' thoughts on...
I don't think she exists too. I think that
I think that's a valid theory.
Yeah, I think that she's also a personality that he thinks of because I think listening to some of the analysis that people have on YouTube, someone pointed out that I forget the main character's names. What is he?
He's just the narrator.
Oh, yeah, he sure. That's
Tyler Durden.
He has no identity. He has no identity. He's a blank slate.
Yeah,
he refers to himself as Jack, but it was from the example of the organs speaking.
Well, and he
makes up names wherever he goes anyways. Okay, so the narrator.
Normally he calls himself as Jack.
Yeah, I'll say the Jack or the narrator. Jack the narrator. He may have been raised by a single mother as well. And so he more got the feminine side than a masculine side growing up.
Right.
And so he would have a more nurturing type of personality or nurturing type of spirit from getting that from his mom.
Yeah.
So that is, when he sees her, that is the counterfeit of trying, because she comes right after like all the support groups, right?
Yeah, she starts coming into the middle of them.
He's at a low point where he's getting nurtured, and now he's getting an image of a nurturing somebody because he wants that, but he's also turning away from it when Tyler comes around. It's like a devil in an image.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that I think as men sometimes, because I'm thinking of like him being vulnerable and other men being vulnerable, and they're okay, but sometimes we don't want like a woman. Because there's a narrative that we're going to see in a moment that he has deep down in his subconscious of what a man is. And she's kind of coming and seeing him be in this state. And honestly, he finds her attractive, right? So there's this vulnerability that he has in front of somebody he finds attractive, but he's in no relationship with. And I also think what's going on there is, I mean, he has that line where he says, her lie reflected my lie. So there's that deflection that he has where he knows what he's doing is not right.
But when she's there, he's reminded of it and he can't like ignore it anymore.
He can't cry anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
He can't pretend anymore. It's,
right.
It's being shown right in his face. Like, this is you right here. You're just a tourist.
Yeah.
You're just like her.
Ooh, you're just a tourist. Go ahead.
Another side of him, like Tyler.
We have his big quote unquote like call to adventure moment is his condo getting blown up, his nest, his security, all that stuff that defines him. And that propels him to literally call out to Tyler Durden. And so they have the conversation on the plane in the beginning. But it's interesting because even before that conversation, there's already like these little flashes of Tyler, these hints that there's something else going on. Like he mentions his insomnia and he says, you wake up in strange places and don't remember how you got there when he's talking about the plane. I'm like, oh, that's interesting right there. And then there's a moment where he's on like a flat escalator and Brad Pitt's on the other side. And he says, could you wake up as a different person? And I'm like, this is so damn obvious now. Like, how did I not catch this the first time? But
I like when he's talking to the doctor. And there's just right behind him in his subconscious, and he's like whispering what to say. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
This is so stupid. Damn it.
Dang.
He's not in the basement. He's whispering again.
This is over.
Yeah. So obvious.
It's so, yeah. It's so
Why are
good.
you in my house? I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That I would be mad too. Like, what are you going? What? You're crazy.
So when he calls out to Tyler, they go drinking, they smoke, they go to the billiard hall bar, right? And there's so many great lines that Tyler Durden has, and I think this is what always makes a great antagonist is when you can hear things they say and nod your head. That line, like, the things you own end up owning you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great line, and it's true.
He's been bars.
It happened to
He spits a lot of bars.
Yeah.
Now a question of etiquette.
Jake the narrator.
We are a generation of men raised by women. There's a lot of conversation here about a lack of fathers because there's quote each moment with Tyler Durden is kind of the film wrestling with a different aspect of masculinity. So there's the fatherlessness. There's the conversation where they're talking about like the people going into gyms trying to look like Calvin Klein. Is that what a man looks
That what
like?
a man looks
What
like.
he says, what's that? Masturbation.
Self-improvement is masturbation.
Self-improvement is masturbation. That's
Yep.
crazy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who would you fight, Gandhi?
Yeah. Nice.
that was a wild answer.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. He's trying to, through these conversations with Tyler. And this is the interesting thing with men is like it starts off with conversations and then we move into action. We want to create something. And that's what leads to the creation of Fight Club. It's his own support group, basically, based on the philosophies of Tyler Durden. So there's an idea that's prevalent in cultures that you need a period of time. This is actually a very ancient idea that Fight Club taps into here, that you need a period of time that's dedicated to embracing chaos so that it doesn't spill over into the more structured areas of your life. Ancient and modern times, society has these like quote unquote like safe outlets to channel things. And so Fight Club is obviously you can go to your 9-to-5 job and do that. And then you go to Fight Club and you get out all that aggression that's pent up there.
Yeah, so
and then you go back.
Beat up your boss.
Yeah, literally.
Right. So you don't beat up your boss, but as we'll see in a moment, it crosses over into that. It can't be confined to that. So one of the things that Brad Pitt mentioned in an interview about Fight Club is how fast society changed in history in terms of how men were supposed to act. Particularly, he talks about political correctness in this interview. And he talks about how, like, you have,
And this was 25 years ago, right?
Yeah, just 25 years ago.
That's so wild.
But centuries and centuries of men being these providers, hunter-gatherers, warriors, all these different things. And then once you get to, like, post-World War II, men slowly start to become more and more domesticated with each decade. And so one of the things that he says in that interview that really speaks to him about Fight Club is like, the Fight Club is speaking about something that in the grand scheme of human history is fairly new that we're dealing with. And 25 years later, we're still right here. And it arguably might be even worse than it was in 1999.
Because masculinity is now presumed as like a weapon.
And toxic.
Sense. And in the sense, what is a man now? Because that's what people are thinking. So,
well, and it's men trying to find their identity. Like when the condo gets blown up, he says, it wasn't a bunch of stuff that got destroyed. It was me. And it's crazy because it's like, you look at that line and you might think that's ridiculous, but at the same time, like if our places got blown up and all our Blu-rays and all our books went in or all your Transformers, and it's like I might actually say something like that.
I'd cry.
That's very real.
I'm just quick story. One of my Avenger Tower sets broke. I told Nick and Jason this, and I almost cried. Like, I almost cried about it.
I think it's more so just this intense search for self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
And he found it in his apartment and furniture, and it's the only way that he found it.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's not necessarily bad, it's just how much emphasis he put on it.
Yeah.
With no other outlet for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So his apartment blew up, and then he's
nothing.
Dead.
Yeah. Now, another thing that you got to talk about with Fight Club is soap. There's a lot going on with soap. It's interesting that Tyler Durden sells soap because he's selling you something that's supposed to cleanse you. And it's this false promise that what I have to offer is the solution, is going to cleanse you, because we know the same soap that he's selling is actually, as you mentioned earlier, it's the fat.
Yeah.
It's the excess of society that's being sold back to you and repackaged. So it's ironic because he's actually participating in the consumerism game that
He's
feeding into it.
That he says that he despises. And what's
Exactly.
hindering men.
So he's feeding into it. And then not only that, but he's also, this soap, this thing that is supposed to cleanse you, is going to become the foundation for the very bombs they're going to create to create mayhem in society.
And he lives in and makes it in one of the most rundown, dirty houses ever. And the water is brown.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have clean water.
So he's
They're
making
and selling
soap in the midst of the filth.
Of filth.
Yeah, in their own filth. Absolutely. Literally, their own filth. Yeah. He's selling all those things right back to people. And the scene, I think the scene where they're sitting at the table in the rundown house and he does the chemical burn on him. So there's a confronting of death that he's doing with the narrator, because I think that's also one of the themes of the movie is men confronting death. And I'll talk about Nietzsche in a moment, but this very Nietzschean idea of like, God hates us. We are God's unwanted children. We don't need him. That's what Tyler Durden says there, right? And so there's this idea that if you've given up your belief on God, then you let go of your belief of the afterlife, then you have to accept death as all there is.
Yeah.
When he does that scene with the burn, I think that's the moment that Tyler Durden takes over as the dominant of the two personalities. When Tyler Durden injures him, but then also heals him at the same time. I think that's the moment where the Tyler Durden part of him is now in more control, and Edward Norton is taking the back seat, so to speak. The very next scene after that, after the soap, is where Tyler is going to his boss, and he says in the monologue, Tyler's words coming right out of my mouth. And then the basement scene is shortly after that, where he's feeding him lines.
He says a wild crap to his boss.
Yes.
Someone might come in here. Like, he's basically going to say someone's going to come up and shoot up the place. And then just snatches the paper out of his boss's hand. And I'm thinking, how did you not just get the cops called on you immediately?
Well, in the scene where he beats himself up later.
That's why I started to think maybe he is just imagining stuff. Because I was like, he acted that like really well, like pretending that he was getting beat up.
You know what he said? He said, for some reason, it made me think of my first fight with Tyler.
Oh, I didn't catch that. That's good.
Yeah.
Nice.
When he just beat himself up in the parking lot.
And other guys were like, hey, that looks fun.
Oh, dang.
They just came up.
That's
and
good.
like, I was like, wait a minute. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me rewatch this movie again. Yeah.
And
I can pass on it.
I just want to see the hidden details and stuff now.
Yeah. I mean, this is fun to analyze. You know, it's not fun to watch, but it's more fun to talk about, if that makes sense.
When you watch the scenes with him and Marla, you're like, this dude is crazy. And I remember she said, it might be a little early for it, but she goes, you know what? You're the worst. You're the worst thing to ever happen to me.
Yeah.
I started thinking, maybe, but maybe not. Because she was taking like enough Xanax to kill her and stuff like that. And she started acting a lot more normal when she saw a dude who's way crazier than her.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're a nutcase. I don't know what to do with you. And she's like, kind of like,
Can't keep up with you.
Yeah, I can't keep up with you. And she seems more like kind of, her well-being looks a little bit better than just all this, depression and kind of like hopelessness. She's just like, you're a mess. Yeah, I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, good.
Probably got scared.
Look like you're getting on your feet.
Yeah.
So this is actually crazy. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Right. Before we get back to the conversation, I want to take a second and say something to all the men out there who might be listening. I meet a lot of people who listen to this podcast and they say things like, man, it's awesome to hear a bunch of guys who love movies as much as I do just get together and find the deeper meaning of them. And many of them have said, man, I wish there was a place for me to do that, to get together with other people, other guys, just in general, to talk about stories. And that's what we provide at All Things Narrative, is we do offer workshops and group experiences where if you have a group of people that you know, or you want to get connected with a group of people, whether it's in person down here in South Florida or whether it's virtually, we provide workshops that educate you about storytelling and help you to analyze these stories in order to connect with them even more deeply by seeing, how do these stories speak to us? How do they help us make sense of our lives, the world that we're in? And so whether it's trying to understand the wayward journey of masculinity that we see here in Fight Club and us needing an outlet to get together to experience things, at All Things Narrative, we try to provide these spaces as well. And so if you are interested and you want to learn more about the different workshops and experiences we offer for groups, go ahead and check out the link in the show notes here. It'll take you to a list of our workshops. And at the bottom of that page, you can fill out just a little inquiry form. No cost, nothing attached to it, but just to learn more information or to see how we can bring one of these workshops to your group. And these workshops are going to help you to unpack your story, to better understand the art of storytelling. And so if you like this podcast and you want to go deeper into these different ideas and topics that we discuss here, then check out that link in the show notes and let's have a conversation about how we can bring these workshops to your context. And now back to the conversation. So I mentioned Nietzsche a moment ago, so I want to circle back to that because you guys are all familiar with Nietzsche, right? The philosopher, French philosopher.
No, familiar. No.
So as the Enlightenment was coming to an end and we were starting to transition towards the 20th century, Nietzsche was famous for coining this phrase in a book, The Death of God. And what he meant by that is that we are heading to a place as a society where God is dead, where we are not going to rely on that anymore. That's not going to be our foundation. And so the question is, what now? What comes next? And that's what he's wrestling with in a lot of his books. So in one of his writings, he talks about this idea of the last man. And the last man is basically the shell of what man used to be. He's this passive consumer. He has no sense of meaning or purpose in his life, and he's attached to material things and indebted to the state, whatever it gives him. So obviously the narrator is the quote unquote the last man, Nietzsche's last man in this story. Now, there's another man called the Übermensch, and the Übermensch is the one who rejects what the last man stands for, and he attempts to forge his own path through self-reliance, self-mastery, and self-destruction. So the Übermensch is Tyler Durden. And so just like in Nietzsche's book, these two perspectives of where masculinity is going are wrestling with each other. And what Polinick is cleverly doing is bringing them into one human being and saying that we have the capacity to become any one of these. What binds them together is they're trapped in nihilism because they're operating out of a place of lack in terms of God and some sort of higher power. In other words, they have a hole that needs to be filled with something that's great, that gives them that higher sense of purpose and meaning. And so what happens in Fight Club is that instead of the Übermensch inspiring people to find their own path, because that's what the Übermensch's job is in Nietzsche, Tyler Durden takes the role of the God void that was left and basically channels all of those emotions, all those impulses, whatever you want to call them, and he channels them to himself. And so this is where there's that hypocrisy because he's telling people to not be these blind followers, to question everything. Then all of a sudden you get to Project Mayhem, you question nothing.
You have to stand outside, you're demoralized, you're told you're nothing, you're worthless, you're not given a name or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah. Sounds familiar.
Do you want to elaborate?
Maybe not yet.
Not yet. It might come.
But also, like, that turns, though, for Jack the narrator when his breast friend guy ends up getting shot.
Oh, his breast friend. That's awesome.
Listen, I don't remember these characters.
You didn't even mean to make that joke, did you?
No, that's the guy.
You're my breast friend.
what's it called? Your phone book. You got to remember the name. What was his name?
Bob. How do you not?
No, I'm not gonna.
His name was Bob. He was a person.
Yeah.
His name was Robert Paulson. Robert Paulson.
He's also
Death. Project Mayhem does have a name.
That's
yes, because it's interesting because there is something very religious about that scene.
Yeah,
where when he dies and they're trying, you're literally watching people make meaning of death in light of the absence of God. And that's how they're doing it in that moment. In Death, in Project Mayhem, you do have a name. Because what Tyler Durden is doing is he's stripping them of an identity. And he's not, unlike the Ubermensch, he's not creating leaders. He's inspiring followers. And that's where I think this movie kind of critiques Nietzsche a little bit in saying that, oh no, this impulse, this religious impulse we have, it doesn't just dissolve and go to one or the other of these.
Still,
we channel it somewhere else. And Tyler Durden becomes the product that they are now consuming. They are moving from IKEA furniture decorated apartments to being in his crappy house, unkept house. And they're defining themselves by that now. Project Mayhem becomes all that's left of their identity.
Gosh, that sounds familiar. That's crazy. That's crazy, though.
Well, what I noticed is that in the beginning he said everyone is a copy of a copy, making copies.
Yes.
And then everyone in there is a copy of Tyler Durden, who is a copy of Tyler Durden.
Right.
And they're making more of themselves, copies of a
Durden.
making copies.
Yeah. I mean, I am Tyler Durden. That is like the most profound line in the film, because that is what the movie is trying to prove, is that all these guys who work 9-to-5 jobs and just kind of look normal, like that scene when they confront the guy in the bathroom and they're like, we drive your ambulances. Yeah. We do this, we do that. Anyone can go down this path. But Tyler Durden is reminding them that you are not special. You are not unique. This is where the term snowflake came from, was this movie.
No. Was it really from this one?
Yeah. This is where like the whole and that even has that line, in Tyler we trusted. So it lays it on really thick what this movie is trying to say. But
you could say a glazed on it.
Yeah. When God is dead, we elevate humans to that role. And when we have this lack of timing and purpose, like one of my favorite lines is when he says at the Fight Club meeting, he says, we're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. He's not wrong, right? Yeah. Our great depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. And we're slowly learning that fact, and we're very, very pissed off.
I really like the scene with the guy at the gas station.
Oh, yes. Talk about that.
Guy?
Talk about that. Yeah.
So this guy is just at a gas station working, and he gets pulled out of the... Well, if you've seen this movie, I don't have to describe it to you. But it's the guy who gets pulled out of the gas station. Tyler Durden puts a gun to his head and takes his driver's license. And he asks him, like, why are you here? And what did you want to be? And he tells him he wanted to be a veterinarian. He said, what happened? Guy says, too much school. And he tells him, if you're not on your way to be being a veterinarian in the next 6 weeks, I'm going to come and kill you. And he takes away his driver's license. And
Which is a weird identity thing, because he says earlier in the movie, you are not the contents of your wallet. And he literally takes that from him to prove it.
You are not your khakis.
Yeah, that made me laugh.
And this
says
is where
with such disdain.
That moment is when the narrator is starting to fight back. He's like, "What? Why are we doing this? Like, this is too." He's starting to see it's going too far.
Yeah, but with that one, he kind of agreed.
But he slips back into it, because he says the line about, like, when he wakes up tomorrow morning,
his breakfast is gonna taste better than any meal you and I have ever had. He's gonna have the most beautiful day of his life tomorrow. And I'm thinking, this modern atmosphere is just go get a job and buy all these things. Even if you don't like it, just do it. This is what you get. And the narrator is doing a pretty despicable job. He's basically with the recalls, and he's seeing all these awful incidents going on.
Yeah.
Because of policy, because it's not the right cost compared to, in his formula.
Yeah.
they're not doing recalls. They're letting it slide.
Yeah.
And he's telling the woman, and she goes, which car company is this? A major one. And so he is a slave to this. And really, there is a balance where we need to let go of the things that are just holding us back and go and seek, like, this was the dream that I wanted to do. This is like where my meaning is, and I can achieve this in the modern day.
Yeah.
There are actually tools and stuff that I can achieve within this. Like it can be used for what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like college, a veterinarian, that's in the modern scope.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyler wants to set him free towards that.
That's what's so fascinating about Tyler Durden to me, because Carl Jung talks about the shadow side. And I think there's a bit of Jungian psychology going on in this as well, where Tyler Durden is the repressed shadow side, archetypally, of the narrator. And it's what happens when you allow the shadow to take control of
What's the narrator?
everything. Like his archetype,
Yeah,
I think
everyman?
Purposefully, he is the everyman. He's a blank slate, right?
And what's
Tyler
the
Durden,
shadow side?
Well, Tyler Durden
Warrior.
is, I actually think he's the revolution.
Actually,
I think he transitions from being the warrior when he starts Fight Club to the revolutionary with Project Mayhem.
So I think he's a revolutionary, and with him I see, and he's like, I'm free in every way that you're not.
Yes.
And I see not just revolutionary, but also like especially more in the beginning, freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I see
that's actually a huge part of revolutionary.
Yeah, freedom. Yeah, I know they're very close together and they're closely tied.
Mm-hmm.
And freedom is a concept that I really resonate with.
Yeah.
And being free and what that looks like. And I look at him and I see that he is completely, and I told you guys, he reminds me of almost every single homeless man I've ever met. Because they're free.
Yeah.
They say whatever they want. They go wherever they want. They go wherever they want. Yeah. They're unbound by laws. They get arrested, whatever. Like, they're completely free and completely enslaved at the same time.
Yeah.
To just base like instinct or whatever the needs are in the moment. Mm-hmm. And, like Tyler lives in, it's awful. It's a terrible, like there's nothing clean. It's an awful place.
Well, that's
where he has to go.
Well, and it's his state of mind. And he's literally with Project Mayhem inviting people into his state of mind, so to speak. And that's what's poisoning people.
And he keeps mentioning rock bottom. It's like when you get rock bottom and you have nothing, then that's when you're free. That's when you can do anything. And it was just fascinating. Like, he is free, but also he's not.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what Chuck Palahniuk and David Fincher are getting at, is that society represses the warrior and the revolutionary archetypes in men to where they lay dormant and they make men a slave to whatever society wants them to be. And that's the freedom that I think Tyler Durden, because the shadow is not always a bad thing, right? The part of Jungian psychology is you learn to integrate the parts of your shadow. And so again, there's things with Tyler Durden that aren't bad. Like, you could see that with him, wanting to get the guy to vet school. Like, there's an aspect of him that could be fatherly, that could be like a mentor, but it's so much other.
It's the extremism.
Yeah.
Well, the word integrated is why these characters would be great in Batman Returns, because none of them are integrated.
Yes,
but
very true.
But that's the thing, is Tyler is free in every way that Edward Norton is not, but Edward Norton is free in the way Tyler isn't.
Right.
And so they're not listening to each other. They're just trying to dominate and control each other.
Trying to fight.
So Tyler has this side of freedom that he's selling, but he just wants to manipulate and destroy Edward Norton.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, the holdovers, which we'll do next, is these 4 people are listening to each other and they are working through their issues together. And these guys are just trying to beat each other.
He rejected that. He rejected the groups, and it literally started with him fighting himself.
I think when you stop listening to each other, you get this rise in violence and this rise in mayhem. So the idea that they're detaching from society and foregoing all of this stuff is a Christian thing. Is something that we're called to detach from. Yeah. And he starts that journey, but it dissolves.
Yes.
Right.
Because they're just trying to take over, or Tyler's just trying to take over.
Right.
He's not integrating. He's not even trying to integrate. His inner world is just at war.
Yeah.
And he's losing. where he begins to like really start to lose.
You know, I was just thinking too, every time Tyler and Jake the narrator fought, Tyler would always win. Tyler's always winning those fights.
Right.
And I think the only time we see Jake the narrator... Jack. Okay. Not Jake from State Farm.
No.
Jack the narrator.
State Farm gets blown up.
We didn't see it. We didn't see the insignia. But I think the only time we see Jack the narrator actually win a fight is when he almost kills like that guy.
Yeah, Jared Leto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
Jared Leto?
Yeah, that's Jared Leto, the blonde guy, yeah.
Yeah. And how did he win that fight? He went so overboard. It was so repressed. He had to lash out in the worst possible way just to win that fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that is a way of relating that is very common in the world.
Yeah.
It is very common in many different kinds of societies.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this is highlighting that at a very real level.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good that could have happened
with
that.
in in this very specific revolution that they're starting, but it doesn't get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and part of the issue as well is that there's no sense with Tyler Durden that he could be the problem or could be a problem or part of the problem. It's always everything else out there. And that's, of course, we know that as scapegoating.
Yeah.
And so Rene Girard talks about that when we scapegoat like that, when we're not willing to own up, essentially what we're doing is we're deflecting. We're taking our weaknesses, our insecurities, all these things, and we're saying it's their fault. And then we'll go out and kill and harm and breed our hatred because we're not willing to own up to it, which is why the moment when the narrator says, near the end of the movie, I take responsibility. That is the moment when I think the narrator starts to become free. Because that conversation where they're in the garage and he's trying to stop Project Mayhem. I mean, I should back up for a moment because he starts to realize he is Tyler Durden when he goes and sees in his sleep what he's created. He literally mentions he is franchising.
Yeah.
We have corporate sponsorship. He is the problem now.
Are you sure that this isn't a test?
Yes. Are you sure this isn't a test?
It's so cool. So it's starting to come into focus for me. It's so cool because Tyler represents a society, but he also represents Edward Norton's inner man.
Yeah.
So he's like a victim to society, but Edward Norton's a victim to himself right now because he's at war with himself. His own individuality is being suppressed by another version of himself in his mind. So he's got two fights going on right now.
And that repressed version, I think, because it seems clear between the conversations between the narrator and Tyler Durden that their father left him when he was like 6 or something, right?
Yeah,
so
divorced.
There's a quote that I think it's Polinick who says it, that you have two father figures in your life. The one that created you, your physical father, and then the one that you go out and choose. So you have your biological father and then the father that you decide to follow. And Tyler Durden is like that weird repressed what I think a father would be, that he is choosing to follow, and that others who maybe were fatherless or were not led by their fathers, they're choosing to follow that path as well.
It's just a war of integration.
Yeah,
that's
it is
really what this movie is.
Well,
they're fighting so hard and they can't balance the two together.
And what about that scene when they're driving in the car and Brad Pitt, Tyler Durden is in control, and he tells the narrator, stop controlling everything and just let go.
And let me control it.
Yeah,
that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Isn't it after that Tyler disappears?
For a while, yes.
Yeah. And he goes to find him, and he finds himself.
Well, he finds that Tyler Durden is bigger than just the person now. Now Tyler Durden has spread all across the country.
So now I'm thinking, after that the Tyler take control for a while, because before that it wasn't really franchised out as it was before the accident.
Yeah, it was starting in other places. Yeah, and they were hearing about while they're hitting cars with bats.
Yeah, but even in the house, all those people weren't there beforehand. So
there's a scene right after the car crash where Tyler leaves the broken, bent up narrator in a room in the dark and closes the door. And then when he wakes up, he says, was I asleep? Had I slept? And that's when he discovers all the people in the house, the airline tickets, all that stuff. So yes, I do think he took control for probably a long time.
A month or two.
Yeah.
Who knows?
To get all that, probably.
This is Joe and Jerome.
Oh my gosh!
Joe's the bad one. Joe's Tyler, guys. I'm sorry.
This is Joe.
Remember in the movie when?
Shout out to your stop motions.
Yeah. Remember in the movie where he's like, "Is it true about Tyler that he was born in a psych ward and only sleeps 1 hour a night?"
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "That's ridiculous." I'm thinking, half of that is actually true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're living in a psych ward.
Yeah.
Tyler's Nurse Ratched.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. When we get towards the end of the movie, we see that the narrator's he wants control back. He wants to take control back of his story. And so he has that, I think they're in the hotel where they have that conversation and he's like, I'm everything you're not. Like, I do this, I do what you can't do.
It's the idealized version of himself.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least what he thinks it might be. Yeah. You see what's brilliant about the title of Fight Club is that it's not the physical fight. The Fight Club is literally in his mind.
Yeah.
Like that's the Fight Club. That's the battle there. And so whenever the narrator and the Tyler are fighting in the movie, it's literally him beating himself up. Unsure, like that lack of integration, that war within the self, like that's what we're witnessing there. He comes to this place where he believes that the solution is we have to burn everything down and start over again. We have to wipe the slate clean.
Another black and white move.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost even, again, like to go back to the Christian narrative, right? Like to forgive the debt and make you like washed clean as white as snow, right? So he's almost trying to do this very godlike thing and enact his followers to bring it out. And so when they have that battle in the parking garage and he owns up and he says, I know this is my responsibility. And he gets to that moment where they're upstairs, they're going to watch everything burn. And he recognizes, I know what I need to do. How he has to take out. So what are your guys' thoughts about that realization he has where he realizes he needs to basically literally kill the Tyler Durden within?
I think he died immediately after that.
The narrator?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think the narrator died. He shot,
it's a little weird.
Yeah, some people have lived getting shot in the head, but he shot like, listeners, I'm literally putting a finger gun in my mouth.
Yeah. It could be like a metaphorical, he blew that part of Tyler.
That's how I took it.
He did shoot himself in like the jaw.
The jaw.
Yeah. It was because if he dies in the movie, then it has to end right there. But I think it's more of like a visual metaphor. And then Tyler's got the smoke coming out of his mouth and he dies. So it's like, this is he just killed him in his mind, and to visualize it,
it's
they
him shooting.
They put a gun in his hand.
What do you guys think is the significance of him choosing that spot to shoot himself in?
The cheek? It's a
like
cheek, right? Or the throat?
Cheek, jaw, throat, like whatever that is. Like, what do you guys think? Like, why there? Like, I wonder, is that like a place where you can get shot and survived, and that's why they did it? Or is it like, I don't know, like the mouthpiece, because Tyler was speaking on his behalf,
the only
he's
thing
shutting that up?
Is Tyler's taking over his mouth.
Yeah.
But if you do any other part of the head, the movie's dead. The movie's over.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless it's this is what
and even though
kind of like a fantasy after the fact,
and even though he puts that gun straight in his mouth, it's straight out his head, but somehow it comes out his cheek.
when that happened, I was like, oh,
and he starts talking. He's like,
yeah, I really like the movie up until this part. I feel like it kind of was, I don't know, fumbled, but like it lost me. I was like, I don't know what's going on, where it's trying to say. You had me, but. Yeah, I don't know what the significance of that is.
Well, I think the significance is that Marla is there and he chooses to confess his love to Marla and he embraces Marla. And I think him embracing Marla at the end is like the healthy reconciliation, thank you, with the feminine. And it's actually a very masculine thing because it's him giving himself to the love of a woman, which is like one of the most masculine things you can do, right? So I think it's finding a healthy place for that masculinity to be. And all the things with him and Marla, they kind of find that resolution there in the ending there as they watch the world blow up to Gen X music.
Or his like old life. And he's starting.
He's starting over.
He just went to zero.
Yes,
and now he gets to start fresh.
Yeah, I definitely can see that too.
With a woman on his arm.
Yeah,
and a cheek full of blood.
Yeah. So
they can't even kiss anymore.
Go ahead, Jason.
So I have a question. I guess I want to. So a question I wanted to bring.
Yeah.
And I guess make it a little personal. So aggression is a huge part of this movie, and also I wonder. And these are some questions I've been having. I feel like aggression is a natural part of masculinity.
Yeah.
And I guess violence. But here's the thing. If that wasn't true, why do we like all the stuff that we like? Like sports, hockey, football. What are all the animes that we watch?
Violent action movies.
All the animes that are popular are all fighting. It's all fighting. Dragon Ball.
Powers and I'm fighting. I'm not going to lie.
Heck yeah. I think about that junk. MMA, boxing.
Yeah.
I don't think that comes from sin. What is a healthy, are these healthy outputs for it? What do we do with this aggression? And also a personal question, do you guys have like an urge to fight ever, like physically? Like, do you guys have that? This is like for the table.
My biggest fantasy is to get into a random bar fight.
Yep, I know this.
I think that'd be...
No, I wish I didn't just break my arm again, because I would love to train more in just Sistema or just boxing or anything, just to get that energy out, because it's in there.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the things I learned from Sistema is that if malice is not involved, then it's a lot of fun. It can be a lot of fun if there is not hate in the punches that are thrown. And boxing is a sport that can teeter on these guys hating each other, but it's a sport. And I think we could very much watch that in just the technical skill of it.
I can relate similarly. For me, I've always wanted to do like martial arts, learn, like Muay Thai or something like that. And so I think that desire is there. And I do think that there is, like martial art, like there is an art form to how to channel your aggression.
They channel it outside the bar and they're having fun.
Yeah.
They like it. Like that's not a bad thing. They're trying to find a way to get out of all their oppressed anger that society has like kind of caged.
Yeah.
Or they have caged themselves. It's both, because the fight is both in his head and in society, but it just runs rampant.
Yeah.
And another thing I'll add is I think why we gravitate towards violent movies, violent video games, like all that type of stuff as men, sports, is because psychologically, when you witness an experience like that, in a certain kind of like controlled environment, psychologically you become connected with it, and your brain almost does like I don't want to say like a simulation, but basically like your brain
inputs yourself in that.
Yeah,
scenario.
It almost role plays you to feel some of those emotions, but in like a safe environment. And I think that's what Fight Club like is criticizing with like the television and some of those things it brings up. So I do think that men go to these things. We go to these things because there is something in us that wants that to a degree. And I think we find different ways to channel it, because I think men, we want challenges. I just did a whole podcast. I was on somebody else's podcast, and it was a woman host, and she was asking me about a lot of these questions we're having here about this topic. And I think that's what the Holdovers is really going to set up, is we need some sort of adventure, some sort of thing that's going to keep us moving, keep us thinking, strategizing. So like for me, it's like all things narrative is like that outlet to bring a lot of those, the creativity, right? For you, I mean, it's your stop motions that
self-expression.
You make. And for you, Jason?
So for me, and it looks silly to anyone watching, but it's body surfing.
Okay.
I like being out in the waves and getting smacked and getting hit and trying to ride it with just what I've got, what I've been born with. And it was on the podcast retreat. Remember when I went out and I asked you guys, I said, what do you guys is going through my head when I do this?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
There's a part of me that wants contention. Like I want to fight. I want to contend, and I don't know why. And I don't think about repression. I don't think about, I'm getting out all that. There's just part of me that wants it. Yeah. That wants to just contend with, whether through not always good, but argument, through actual physical, not necessarily violence, but there's a part of me going, well, I get why people are drawn to this. And I wonder if I would want to be in a fight club if I had ever heard of it. It's like, there's part of me that's like, that toys with the idea.
Yeah.
I think to just be careful of language, because contentious is like this way that is like, it's not a good thing. It's just a fight to fight. But I think the desire coming up is to overcome,
right?
Is to face a challenge, overcome, and have like this victorious sense of self.
Yeah.
I think that we always, every stage of life is going to continue and continue and continue.
Yeah.
And you can find that in anything. You can find it in an argument with somebody, and I don't think that's the healthiest way.
Oh, yeah.
But like, that's what the movie is talking about, is like, this is a very slippery slope.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That urge is there.
Yeah.
Like, even to fight just for fighting's sake. There's a temptation there.
Even healthy, like, contention, like if Nick and I go at it of, like, The Last Jedi, that is, I think, a healthy...
You mean when?
When we go at it for The Last Jedi. I think there's, like, that's a healthy, you know...
That's a healthy sense of victory for me.
There it is, right there.
No, it's funny because I think about Dre and I, like, because we like Dragon Ball Z, and that's a fighting anime, and I characterize myself as Vegeta, him as Goku. Yeah, and I be calling him sometimes like, "Hey man, I'm over here training. I'm going to the gym, man. What you over there doing, huh? I'm over here kicking my food. You over here now, huh? Okay." But it is a sense of like we're competing, but it's a healthier competing. Because now
absolutely.
We're both going to the gym. We're both getting healthy and stuff like that.
That's good.
Kakarot, go ahead.
Javaris and I would do that in the house and drive this guy crazy.
Nah. Rest in peace.
Well, guys, any other final thoughts on Fight Club as we wrap up?
You said that the last image had a.
Oh, thank you for bringing it up.
I'm curious. I'm curious.
The very last shot of this film. Did anyone know?
No. It was a big old
wiener. That's right. So. That is significant because not only is it awesome that he mentioned earlier how he would splice that in. So there's this sense that he has spliced something into the narrative we've watched unfold.
Listeners,
but also
Jason just pulled out old string cheese out of his pocket.
It's a cheese stick.
A cheese stick and placed it in the middle of the table.
Don't say cheese.
Wait,
That's exactly what that was, but... You didn't have to say nothing.
Hey man, listen, you don't want to put it out there.
It was funny.
That is the best way for this episode to end, just like the movie, with the sign of the testiculars fully out.
Oh, that's what it means.
Yeah. Yes,
he regains it.
Yes, he regains his masculinity. Yeah,
that's good.
So it's because
there's a deeper meaning into it.
He said earlier, like if anything, like if I ever tried to shut down Project Mayhem, we got to take your balls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he got him. He has them.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay.
But it's weird because it's also Tyler Durden
doing it.
That is doing alive? It. So yeah, there's a healthy part of him that's still alive.
And the Halloween or something.
Oh, God, yeah.
The villain's still alive.
The Tyler Durden in us needs to like break us out of what's actually keeping us captive in the modern day and push us towards the dream that we feel like we can't live and we're just not, like masculinity is good and that drive forward to achieve and overcome should be allowed to push us forward. But there's a point where it becomes destructive and when it completely takes over our lives where we're just chasing our base instinct and urges that we fall to ruin. That's my
if I can piggyback off of Jason,
go ahead.
I was even thinking the reason why at first I really didn't like this movie because it was just so anti-masculine in the sense of just like it's everything a man shouldn't be, like insecure, like complacent, being aimless. I was just like, like brother, get away from me. So it was kind of like the disgust of just like, as a man, you shouldn't be like this. So that's why I agree with Jason. Sometimes you kind of need a little Tyler to knock on the door and be like, hey, we need to break you out of this complacency.
It's the archetypes. So we can move in and out of the archetypes. Yeah. You don't push away Tyler Durden. You integrate Tyler Durden.
Yes. That's good. Yeah. And it's one thing to get that when you're in a space like Fight Club, but it's another thing like, how am I actually in the world living that out?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And that's what the next episode is going to be all about. As we've diagnosed the problem, now we will get to the solution with the holdovers. So join us next week for that episode. And until next time, don't talk about this episode or you'll break the first rule of Fight Club. Just kidding. The rules are meant to be broken. Please talk about this episode, share it, and we'll be back next week. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, produced by All Things Narrative. If you'd like to learn more about our coaching, workshops, events, please check out allthingsnarrative.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at All Things Narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and tune in next time as we continue exploring the stories we love and the stories we live. Take care.